It's the Hoffman Show. I feel like we're on different boats today, Anthony. On Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I thought I was ready to start the show, and I looked down to go to put my headphones on, and somehow this big curly wire, this one, that's always tangled in some form or fashion, but typically not in a way that inhibits me from doing my job, was wrapped around the little skinny wire on the side of my headphones. And they were intertwined. So I had to take the headphone out of its socket and then unwrap it, put it back on. And by the time that happened, Anthony was playing on a boat, and we were into the part of the lyrics that I'm pretty sure Anthony thought I would be talking over.
Yeah, I did, and
that's what you get for playing on a boat.
Yeah. I thought that, the boat song was going to match the opener.
Yeah, no, I totally understand why you did what you did.
Yeah.
Sorry for messing up your
It's all good. I should have audibled. But
did you see that I was struggling?
I didn't have another song in queue. I didn't have audition open. This over here wasn't working either, so yeah.
Essig was distracting me with Tales of Wheel of Fortune last night. If you know, you know. Prime Real Things candidate, although, yes. I don't know, it's a family show. Then again, so is Wheel of Fortune.
Yes.
Anyway, it's Friday. We're all over the place today, but in a good way. We got all the big stories covered. We got our usual Friday lineup of guests, which means Clint Yates is going to join. We have some extra fun with Kevin Pelton from ESPN. He'll join us at 5 o'clock talking NBA playoffs. That's where we're starting the show, right, Anthony? NBA playoffs where we start the show?
Yes, sir. We have to, man. That boy, JB.
Jaylen Brown. What a performance from him last night as the Celtics go up 2-0 and make us all, with our consternation about the Celtics, feel kind of silly. And I don't know. I've kind of felt like that was the case the entire time. I think you and I are actually on the same page here, where we're both kind of like, yeah, everyone's freaking out about the Celtics, but they've won both series in 5 games. And Jason Tatum, they make it sound like he's averaging like 12 points a game and forgot how to dribble. And he's averaging in the mid-20s and is largely fine. And that's kind of what's happening here.
Yeah, I just think everybody thinks these games should be, blowouts. They shouldn't be close. You got to remember, these are NBA guys that they're playing against. Like, they're in the Eastern Conference Finals for a reason. Granted, we all expect, the Celtics to go on and win, hopefully, a sweep or a gentleman's sweep. But we just got to realize that these guys are also really good at basketball, and it's not just going to be a 20-point, 30-point blowout every game.
Whoa. Time for a Java update, Anthony.
Oh, okay. 4 hours, 2 hours?
I don't know. This one says ready to use.
Yeah.
Anyway, you were saying about the Celtics?
The Celtics. I think my biggest takeaway from yesterday's game, I think in terms of Jaden Tatum's, involvement in the offense, I think that is a little bit concerning just because of, in the fourth quarter of game 1 and then sort of kind of all yesterday, he looked a little disinterested, disassociated. But also, I just think that's one of the strong suits of, the Celtics. They have all these guys that can, go out there and impact the game. And yesterday just wasn't his game to, go out there. JB had it going. And I think Joe Mazzulla did his, the wise thing of just allowing Jaylen Brown to control everything. And maybe, Jaylen Brown's performance was a direct, attack on him not making one of the All-NBA teams. But I think that's just one of the pros and cons of, being on a team that's as talented as the Celtics. Last year, JB was averaging 27. This year's numbers are down, so you're probably going to miss out on an All-NBA nomination. But shout out to Jaylen Brown being able to carry the torch yesterday and ultimately just put the team on his back.
Yeah, ultimately, if you average 23 points, 5.5 boards, 3.6 assists, that's a heck of a season, but it's not All-NBA.
Yeah.
But he does own the Pacers. He's 28-4 against the Pacers per game this season. 28-6. His assist numbers are down. He's a scorer against them. And I think that look, Jaylen Brown, known non-passer. especially in the postseason. He's averaging 2.7 assists a game, but like he's an excellent defender, and he makes things happen for them offensively, and he is capable of carrying a team on any given night. Whether he is actually worth the Supermax contract that he's given, like I kind of hate the Supermax thing because he's one of these guys that's like very, 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 very good, but there's no way that you should be paying him 35% of your salary cap or whatever that Supermax number is. But like, good for him. But you're going to need to produce at this kind of level in big spots. And when the dude who's about to get another Supermax from your organization in Tatum has an off night, like you better be there to pick it up. And again, like the other thing with Tatum is he had an off night, and I know like the plus minus number in the 6 minutes he's out, that's the plus 16 that they are for the game because he's every other starter's plus double digits and he's even. So the Celtics literally won the game in the 6 minutes that he is out. But that is not the full story of how those numbers actually work because there's obviously stretches where they're up, stretches where they're down with him on the floor in the 42 minutes, which he led the team in. But his down night is 23 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. Like, that's not a bad night. He had a bad shooting night from 3. It was 1 of 7, but 4 for 4 from the free throw line, and ultimately is a part of a win. I do think that for Tatum, like you mentioned the disinterested nature, or that it feels like at times, and I think there's two things that can be true at once. One, that should just not happen with a superstar where he's not impacting the game in some way. And Tatum can be a dominant rebounder. And I would love, and I think they would love to see him be more involved in other parts of the game. And Doris Burke was talking about on the broadcast last night where DB's like, he's a better defender than this as Pascal Siakam just drives right by him. So there's things like that you're like, all right, we gotta clean that up. But offensively, he doesn't need to be assertive every single night because of the depth they have. And so I think this is the interesting thing for Boston is, would you try to really get him going and reestablish the hierarchy, if you will, going into a harder series against a Western Conference champion in the NBA Finals, assuming that these next 2 games go the way, or 2 of the next 5 games go the way that you need them to? Or do you just rely on your depth? And do you just say, on any given night, someone's going to have it going, and we'll find that person? Because I think there's on some level a risk in that. Like the positive to that is you just move the ball around, you play ball, and you see who winds up hitting shots, and then you start to feed them a little bit more. You bend the shape towards whoever's hot. The downside of that is you can get 5, 6, 7 guys when you're that deep looking around being like, it's not my night, it's your night, right? And then nobody actually takes hold of the night. And that's when Tatum's got to be like, okay, it's my night. And really, I prefer Tatum to approach every night like it's my night. And again, whether that's scoring or whether having an impact elsewhere on the game, I think that's where he can be better. But let's also not pretend like he's having a bad postseason. Let's not pretend like this dude isn't still one of the 10 best players easily on the face of the planet. I mean, it was all but 1 game ago that, yes, he had a rough final stretch of regulation, but he ultimately winds up with 36 points and 12 rebounds. The game before that, a closeout game against Cleveland, he's 25, 10, and 9. Games before that, he's 33 and 11, 33 and 13. Like, what are we actually talking about here for a guy that's averaging 25 points and 10 rebounds this postseason? His three-point shooting has been terrible. That's just the thing. But if he can fix that, Anthony, going into the NBA Finals and keep playing like he is otherwise, well, now you're looking at a dude that's averaging like 30 and 10, and the Celtics will probably roll to their first championship of the Jason Tatum era. When we get back, we'll pick up that conversation and kind of the idea of whether or not you'd want to be challenged a little bit more if you're Boston, or are you fine just rolling through and then waiting for the West teams to beat each other up in the Western Conference and then meet the winner in the NBA Finals? Also, take your calls on the NBA playoffs, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. More NBA playoff talk when we get back here on The Hoffman Show. Oh my God, Anthony, it's the guy from the State Farm commercial. Ludicrous.
Oh my gosh.
You were looking. Were you looking for Jake from State Farm walking out there?
I was because you were pointing this way. So I'm like, hold on, am I missing something? And also, I didn't have the stream. Let me click over to the stream. Okay, the stream is also delayed, so I'm looking at a train station, a train go by. That's what I was looking at.
Well, you're. I see when we're gonna. No, I don't want to peel back the curtain that much. I was just like, I just figure you look at me and you're just looking at the side of my head.
I really thought you were looking that way, so I'm like, hold on. I'm like, does he see somebody I don't see?
No, I was talking about Ludacris because he's in that one.
Yeah.
And they make the rollout joke at the end.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it just didn't go as well as planned.
That one went over my head. I will admit. Yes.
Pew!
Yeah. Yeah. My bad.
Pew!
Missed that one.
Pew! It's the Hoffman Show, a show of high intellect, highbrow, and high shenanigans here on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and you can watch this absolute clown show on YouTube at the Team 980. So, Ant, we were talking about Tatum and whether or not you're trying to get him going before the NBA Finals. And, we're going to see what kind of challenge this Indiana team presents because, or we might not get to see much of a challenge, which would be very similar to these first few rounds where the team that the Celtics plays either does not have or loses within the series its superstar. Tyrese Halliburton goes out of last night's game. Rick Carlisle saying afterwards that we hope this is a very short-term aggravation thing. Left hamstring soreness is the initial diagnosis. But, Boston just literally can't catch any more breaks, which obviously for advancing is good. Ultimately, the goal is to win and the easier path. There are no bonus points or multipliers for difficulty. It's not gymnastics. It's basketball. There's a scoreboard. It's straightforward. Ball goes through the hoop. They put points up on it. And at the same time, if I'm Joe Mazzulla and I'm Brad Stevens in that front office, I'm like, dang, this is going to be a bit of a wake-up call for us when we get to the finals because the intensity is going to be so much greater. And what you just have to hope is that the Western Conference team that has survived that intensity is wounded itself, and you're able to ratchet yours up, and I won't say run them off the floor, but that you can match it, and your freshness beats their tiredness on two teams that are going to be fairly evenly skilled, and that's kind of Boston's path to claiming yet another Larry O'Brien trophy.
Yeah, but the good thing about the Celtics is most of their leaders, they've been there before. They've been in these championship situations. So they've been at the mountaintop and they've fallen. And I think going into, a series against whoever comes out of the West, I think they're going to be mentally prepared for it. But going back to, the Tatum stuff, in terms of, his numbers and his postseason, I just think when you think of a superstar, you expect when the playoffs come around, you expect their play, their impact to, elevate a little bit more. And his numbers have sort of regressed from, the regular season. And I think that's sort of kind of why Tatum is receiving some of the criticism that he's received, just because he went from averaging almost 27 to now just putting up 25, or, he has absences in the games, or there are just times in the games where we just don't know Tatum's even playing. So I think when you have a superstar of his caliber, somebody that's been NBA first team and things of that nature, you expect this guy to show up night in, night out, especially in these big moments. And he's been up and down. He's been up and down, to say the least.
No, that's totally fair. I'm trying to grab these numbers real quick. His playoff per 36 numbers. Because if you look at the regular season per 36 minutes, Tatum averaged 27 points a game, 8 rebounds a game, 5 assists a game. In the playoffs, he is 22.6 points per game, 5 assists, 9 rebounds. So his assist numbers are the exact same. His rebounds are up. His points are down significantly. Yeah. Because his per game numbers, you can obviously see the points come down from 26-9 to 25-2. The assists and the rebounds are up, but he's also playing 5 extra minutes per game. But even, adjusted for minutes, his rebounding numbers are up, which is something I talked about caring about earlier. Can you be more assertive in other areas? But you're right. The best players typically score. We're talking the literal very best. Your Jokic's, your Giannis's, and their championship runs recently. Your Steph's, your LeBron's. If you're the best player on a championship team, you're going to elevate at a really, really high level in the playoffs. And realistically, that's not who Tatum's been even when they were, winning championships. Or not winning championships, but winning the Eastern Conference back in 2021, 2022. Mm-hmm. He was 27 a game in the regular season that year per 36 minutes. And in the playoffs, his rebounding numbers dropped, his assist numbers dropped, everything dropped, including his scoring, all the way down to 22.5 per game. Yeah. Which is interesting, too, because then you're if you're Boston, we're well, we made the finals that year. Yeah. And we ran into the Warriors, who were a buzzsaw. And I do wonder that if they make it again, they faced a bona fide champion.
Yeah.
Right? We know that the NBA is going to have a new champion for the 6th time in 6 years this year. Minnesota's never been there. The Dallas Mavericks, for as many big games as some of their guys have played in, and Kyrie obviously has been there, but like they collectively and Luka has not been there. And so is there another level that Tatum and Brown and Derek White and Drew Holiday can get to? Actually, I don't think White, even though he's in San Antonio, I think he missed the championship window. But that Drew Holiday, who's won a championship, that Brown and Tatum that were facing the Celtics or facing the Warriors a couple years ago can get to, that can overwhelm that Western Conference team. Like, these are the fun mind games. At the end of the day, like, the simplest take is, if I was the Boston Celtics, I want Jason Tatum to play better than this, but I also think some of the criticism of Tatum is overstated because he is not trying to be overly assertive on a team that has other options, and that's ultimately wise of him.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think
you got a bad feeling.
I just think that the general public just has a higher perception of what, because we know we've seen him score 50 in a game 7. We've seen him have these monster games, and then there's just times where he just goes, he's just absent and he's just not showing up in the moment. So I want the Celtics to go out there and win, but it's going to come at the expense of Jaden Tatum leading this team. JB, yes, we understand he's great. We understand Drew Holiday, he's been playing well this series, but Jason Tatum is the leader of that team. He has to show up night in, night out, especially if they want to go out here and win their first championship.
I mean, I think the problem for Tatum the last 2 years has been his jump shooting. I mean, this is a guy that earlier in his career was a much more elite mid-range shooter for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then even regular season, his first couple years in the league, he's 43% from three as a rookie on 242 attempts. He's just got more attempts every single year, but the percentage hasn't been able to stay over the last couple. He's 37% in his sophomore year. His third year in the league, he's 40, and then he's 38, and then all of a sudden he takes a huge leap in attempts, in part because he plays more games, but he's over 600 attempts the last 3 years, and he's 35, 35, 37. Well, this year in the playoffs, he's 26% from three. And so when you look at that 22.6 points per game, that 22, let's see, what's his actual per game average? Get out of these per 36 numbers. The 25-2 he's averaging in the postseason on 26% three-point shooting. Well, if he hits one more three a game, which still isn't like amazing, that'd put him in the low 30s. But if he hits one more three per game, we're talking about 28 a game in the playoffs. And, I know it's like one basket, but like really how differently is this conversation if he's averaging 28 a game?
Yeah.
He's averaging 28, 10, and 5 a game.
It's different.
Nobody's batting an eye. So,
nope.
Like, the good news, I guess, for the Celtics and Jason Tatum is, hey, bro, hit a couple more threes and you're set. Knock down one more three that you're attempting. And he went 1 for 7 last night. If he finds his jumper, I think the Celtics are quite set. If not, because the other thing is, like, late in games, it's been an issue.
Yep. Because
he's the one shooting. They're going to have to find other ways to win. They do last night. Jaylen Brown, a 40-piece as the Celtics cruise to a 16-point victory. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, the other big story looming and lingering over this NBA playoffs off the court is the future of the NBA on television, and specifically inside the NBA. Charles Barkley, this will stun you, but he was not shy with his opinions on the subject. You'll hear from the Chuckster if you have missed these comments next on the Team 980. Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up at 4:45, it is our weekend preview. And then coming up at 5 p.m., our pal Kevin Pelton joins the show. Kevin writes for ESPN.com. He's one of the best basketball writers in the biz, and it is our pleasure to welcome him to break down both of these series and sneak in a question, if I can, Anthony, about the Wizards coaching search. So we will get to all of that coming up at 5 p.m. Clinton Yates, 5:30. Little Commanders talk for you at 6 with Take Command. And then how about a really fun interview to close out the show? Casey Kruger, Spirit Defender, Spirit in action tonight at Audi Field. We are broadcasting live, Anthony, from the epicenter of the DC sports universe, the southern tip of the district. Yes, on one side of Capitol Street tonight, you have the Nationals. On the other side, you have the Spirit.
Yes, sir.
The Mystics are off. The Wizards are long done. The Capitals are long done. And it's May, so the Commanders are in the middle of OTAs, and they don't OTA on a Friday. So we are at the epicenter of the DC sports universe on the southern tip of the district. So that's all still to come. That's how our show looks. And we have a show, which is not something, unfortunately, that Charles Barkley and Inside the NBA can say in a couple of years. The news came from multiple angles this week, although it hasn't been officially announced, I believe, by the NBA, that the NBA is returning to NBC, which is fantastic. I'm actually very excited about that and think that there's a kind of a fun secondary conversation to have there and in a moment. But they're also going to Amazon, and they're sticking with ESPN. And as a result, TNT is going to be the odd player out. Really, really excellent coverage of this from Andrew Marchand in The Athletic. We talked to Andrew about a week and a half ago on the show. If you missed that interview and you want to know more about this, highly recommend checking that out in our podcast feed. So if you just search Hoffman Show, Andrew Marchand, it's on my YouTube page as well, at Craig Hoffman, of course, at ours, at the Team 980. But the shortest version of this is there's a TNT executive, like the lead executive at TNT a couple years ago that was basically like, yeah, we don't need the NBA. And the NBA apparently really didn't like that. And they were looking for another partner. One of the old TNT executives, the old Turner Sports executives, now runs sports at NBC. And NBC has wanted the NBA back since it lost it to ESPN back in the early 2000s. And sure enough, they can put together a package that even though TNT has the rights of first refusal to match, they don't have some of the things that NBC can put in the package. And so it has to be an equal thing to refuse, and NBC can just offer a better package, and thus they took it. So how are things going at Turner? The answer apparently not great. Here's Charles Barkley on the Dan Patrick Show.
Morale sucks, plain and simple. I just feel so bad for the people I work with, Dan. These people have families, and I just really feel bad for them right now. These people I work with, they've screwed this thing up clearly, and we don't have zero idea what's going to happen. I don't feel good, I'm not going to lie, especially when they came out yesterday and said we bought college football. I was like, well, damn, they could have used that money to buy the NBA.
Yeah,
but
it says TNT Sports added college football playoff games in a 5-year deal, their licensing deal with ESPN. Maybe that's why they're buying this, because they don't, the money they were going to use on the NBA, they got to do something with.
Yeah, that's the first thing came to my mind. We've never had college football, never been involved with college football. And I'm like, wait a minute, shouldn't we be spending every dime we got to keep the NBA? So morale sucks, to be honest with you, Dan.
Charles Barkley, never one to mince words. And it just sucks because, I think you cannot recreate Inside anywhere else. You could have the same exact personalities and even many of the same producers at ESPN, but the feel of the network is different. There's something about it being on TNT that is the natural homegrown identity of TNT Sports that you just can't recreate. And it's these things come and go. Charles and Shaq and Kenny and EJ are not getting any younger. There was always going to be a time where you figured like EJ would just retire and be like, I've had a good run. This is fun. Or actually, there's always been, like, Charles Barkley's been threatening to retire in 3 years for 20 years. So, Anthony, this is not like the end of Inside the NBA is something that we all thought would happen eventually. But the fact that it's happening because the bosses of Inside the NBA seem to have made a ridiculous self-owned mistake 3 years ago with their words in like a newspaper column or whatever, wherever these comments were made, is didn't have that one on the bingo card is how this would ultimately go down.
Yeah, and it just doesn't sit right with like anybody because again, in terms of covering the NBA, this is probably the best show that does it, like out of everybody.
Which is hilarious because the basketball analysis is terrible. Like,
yeah.
I was joking early. Clinton and I were talking earlier. Yate's going to join the show at 5:30, but we were talking earlier, just off off the show, obviously.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this, and he was like, "Hey, look, if I'm going to come on and break down a game, like I want to make sure that I've actually watched the game. Like we don't do that in this house, so to speak." And he's like, "No, that's what Charles does. Charles is at the game and doesn't watch the game." Which like is actually somehow part of the charm. That's not a shot at Charles Barkley.
Yeah.
It's hilariously part of what makes him great.
Yeah. I think they just have a good mix. You have Charles that doesn't necessarily watch the game fully. You have Kenny who's really good with the X's and O's.
Kenny's
You got
great.
Ernie who's also good at facilitating the conversation. Then you have Shaq who sometimes has some good things to say, and then sometimes he's there for comedic relief.
Yeah,
So.
Shaq sees everything as if Shaq was still playing.
Yeah.
Which sometimes makes for really interesting and unique and incredible insight, and other times makes no freaking sense at all.
Yeah.
And it's that I think some of the people they brought in over the years, from Candace Parker to Dwayne Wade to Draymond,
Yep.
like they've done a really good job of when there is a hole on the desk of filling it with someone who does a great job and gets the show. And there's just such a character and a personality that the second you're there, like you're a part of it, and what like kind of where you fit in, like which is a compliment to the whoever is remaining on the desk on that given day.
Yeah.
But the four of them, and it started as the three of them, of course. The documentary that they did a couple years, by the way, on Inside is fantastic and is worth folks checking out. I'm sure it's on Max because that's where all the Time Warner stuff is. But it was really, really well done. But like it's just magic. And I think the flip side of this coin is ESPN has been chasing this for years.
Can't get it right.
Nevertheless, something close to Inside. They haven't had something that I would consider a good desk in years. I mean, the current one is awful.
Yeah.
And I like a lot of the people on it, but like you talk about Ernie's ability to get the right people the ball.
Yep.
Stephen A just always has the ball. And I don't think that's on Malika as the host. I think it's on the people higher up the ladder that are like, Stephen A is going to get the ball. And I would wonder why. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. Chris Paul's on the desk with them.
Yep.
So you have Chris Paul, one of the greatest point guard of the most recent generation, non-Steph Curry category, right? You have Bob Myers, executive of the year multiple times over, 4-time NBA champion. You have Mike Wilbon, who's covered this league for, I don't know, was Wilbon on the desk yesterday? Whatever the combination was. Wilbon typically there. Covered the league for 40 years. And you got a 30-second like bumper segment is what they call it in the business, where you can get a quick thought from somebody. And they used to toss that to Jalen Rose all the time, and Jalen would crush those. Quick bit of insight, something quippy, something humorous, and get you to the next commercial to get you back to the game. And it's Stephen A. What do you want to see from Jason Tatum in the second half? He's got to shoot more, rah, 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 and just like classic Stephen A. nonsense. Yeah. And it's terrible. And so this begs the question. This is a fun question that we should bat around maybe next week. Who's your dream NBA desk? Whether they remake ESPN's desk, which I think is coming because the criticism has been so loud that it feels like this is the kind of thing where they just reimagine everything next year. Everything's on the table. Yeah. Or if you're going to NBC, who do you put on that desk? For one, it won't be Charles Barkley, EJ, Kenny, and Shaq, because EJ has always said, I am not leaving Turner. But Charles is going to try, and it might not be on any of the networks.
Well, I've talked to the guys about everybody signing with my production company, because I have my own production company, and I would love to do that if we lose it. But I have definitely actually somebody suggested that to me, to be honest with you, on the internet. So why don't Charles Barkley sign these 4 guys total, his production company, and sell it? I'm like, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
But like I say, we're just sitting back waiting on these people to figure out what they're gonna do. My 2 favorite wines are Inglenook and Opus. And these clowns I work for, they've turned us into Ripple and Boone's Farm and Thunderbird. Like, we got the best studio show. And it's so funny, we just won the best studio show, but these fools turned us from Inglenook and Opus into damn Boone's Farm and Ripple. It's crazy.
Tough day for Boone's Farm and Ripple.
Yeah, that was that was a stray, man.
They're just the execs of those wine companies are sitting there like,
what do we do?
What do we do, Chuck? Sorry, you don't like our wine, bro. The networks are going to want control over their own stuff. If those guys go do a show on YouTube, on the internet somewhere, it's just, the problem is you can't do the same show without that level of television production.
Yeah.
Their show is so incredibly well produced with the graphics and all that kind of stuff. It's really hard to do that without, like, literally a television studio and all of the boards and high tech equipment that goes with it. So, yeah. Charles got a lot of money.
Yeah.
So does Shaq. So do the other guys at this point.
They can figure
But,
something out.
Shaq's got, like, insane money.
Yeah.
Chuck's got real good money. But that's building a literal television production studio, or finding one, is with the TNT level capabilities, is not as easy as it sounds. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, it is our weekend preview, which, in the spirit of Ernie Johnson's Nito Stat of the Night, Anthony, is brought to you by
Nobody.
Our pal Kevin Pelton from ESPN.com joins us coming up in just a few minutes, talking NBA playoffs. Might check in on, he saw Caitlin Clark in person the other night as well up there in Seattle, so might do a little check-in with him on what he saw from the struggling Indiana Fever and the number one pick in person. That was a close game. It's one they lost at the death, as they call it, Anthony, when they couldn't get the ball in bounds. Not ideal.
That was brutal.
Not great, Bob. Not great at all. Time for our weekend preview, which is brought to you by
Actually, I think I know who. Nobody.
But it's available for sale. Give us a call. Tonight, as we just said in trending, we got the game one of the series for the Nationals and the Mariners. Nats trying to break a nasty little skid. They are 21-27 on the season. They were 21-21, I do believe, which means, Anthony, by my math, they've lost 6 in a row.
That's good math. Proud of you, Craig.
It's I don't know that I actually have the records right. They might have been 20-20, but either way, it's not been good. Mackenzie Gore is on the mound tonight for Washington. He's just 2-4 on the year, despite the fact that he's got a 3.30 ERA, so not terrible for the young Nats, hopefully soon stud. But obviously not enough to get things done. See if they can get the bats going. 3-game set ends on Sunday. Of course, it'll be a 1:35 on Sunday. And then the Nationals are off to Atlanta. They start with a 4:10 first pitch on Memorial Day. That is the wraparound to Monday. Meanwhile, the O's are in Chicago this weekend, where they will take on the White Sox. Other than that, interesting. I'm gonna go global for a second, Anthony. It's the FA Cup final this weekend, which is the last basically it's the last soccer game of the year. In terms of the international stuff, you've had the Champions League, you've had all that. Now you got Manchester City, Manchester United in the FA Cup final, which obviously tremendous rivalry. And there are stories out there that Manchester United, win or lose, who's had one of their worst seasons in a while, is going to fire their manager. They're 18-6-4, 18 wins, 6 losses, 14 draws. That was 8th in the Premier League this year. And Eric Ten Hag is on the way out. And it's going to be interesting because can you imagine if they lose or they win the final? Man City's a behemoth. Like, Manchester City should win this game. They're the better team. They're the better side, if you will. But if he wins, beats Man City, and they're still like, nah, see ya. That's the Premier League, man. It is if you think some of the firings we see in American sports are rough, the way they treat coaches in the Premier League is insane. Because it winds up being, actually read a great book on this at one point, and like what happens is it becomes cyclical because they never give anybody enough time. And so they hire a manager. That manager wants to play a certain style. He brings in his players. But it takes a while to actually teach everybody the system, make sure everybody's on the same page, grow some chemistry. As a result, the record's not as good as the team was hoping, and they fire him. Well, now they've got all these new players that they just spent a bunch of money on that play a certain style, and they hire a manager who plays a different style. So then they have to get rid of all those players, bring in the new players, which takes a little bit of time, and then the new players come in just in time for the manager to get fired, and the cycle of hell repeats itself. And it feels like some of these top-flight clubs with a ton of money, they can't buy themselves a little bit of patience. And I'm not saying that Ten Hag has done an amazing job and actually deserves to stay. I haven't watched enough Manchester United to have strong thoughts on that. And I'm sure there are Man U fans listening, as they've got one of the biggest fan bases in the world, that are like, you're right. And there's also probably some listening that are like, you're wrong. This guy sucks. Fire him yesterday. But it's just this cycle that is the worst in the Premier League, where there's just endless amounts of money. And it's a fun story that's kind of looming over this massive rivalry game that closes the English season out tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't quite frankly understand it. And you were talking about some of the firings in, the United States that we see. Barry Trotz, that comes to mind because we won the Stanley Cup and he ended up getting fired. So it's very unfortunate for those guys over in the Premier League. But I just think winning trumps everything over there. Like you got to win and win often.
Yeah.
If you want to keep your job.
Which is so funny because so many soccer coaches that I know are so process oriented. And then you have these owners that are like, wins. Elsewhere, back on the home front, soccer, Spirit, as I mentioned, they're playing really well right now, electric offensively. Look to keep it going tonight against Seattle. 7:30 is the kickoff. Formula One's in Monaco this weekend, the most unique Grand Prix on the calendar. If you watch one little bit of something this weekend, watch qualifying. Like the race sometimes can be really boring. Sometimes it's incredible because there's crashes and, not that we're wishing anybody to crash, but like things can get turned sideways real quick. And it seemingly always is 5 minutes away from raining in Monte Carlo. But it's such like a skinny course that passing's really hard. So qualifying means everything. And so these guys push it to the limit. And we're talking centimeters from the wall. So Saturday, as they drive through the street course in Monte Carlo, qualifying, going to be a good time. Race on Sunday. That is our weekend preview here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, the biggest event going on in sports this weekend, the NBA playoffs. We will talk more about them with Kevin Pelton next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Coming up at 5:30, Clinton Yates joins for his weekly visit. Got a bunch of NBA stuff to discuss with him. 6 o'clock, get back to some football with Commanders via Take Command, OTAs, takeaways for everybody not named Jaden Daniels on the offense. Then 6:30, we will wrap things up with a chat with Casey Kruger, U.S. Women's National Team and Washington Spirit defender, as she and her mates get ready to get ready to do battle with Seattle Reign tonight at Audi Field. But right now, it's time for more on our top story, which is the NBA playoffs, and thus not my beat.
Today's top story, from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Our guest today, great to welcome him back to the show from ESPN.com. It is Kevin Pelton. Kevin, always good to talk, man. And this time of year is always the time we seem to catch up. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a fun time of year.
No doubt about it. And so let's start in the Eastern Conference and what we've seen from the Celtics so far. And it feels like there's a Jason Tatum narrative developing. Is he struggling? That he's not playing up to the level that people expect. And if you watch, I think you see obviously these stretches where he's not playing well. But you also see a team that hasn't lost very much in these playoffs, even if some of these games have been stressful. And his numbers aren't exactly bad on the aggregate / the average. So as you look at some of the underlying data, and for those that aren't familiar with Kevin's work, he's one of the best guys just writing about basketball, period, but also has a great feel for the data. Like, is there some underlying data that suggests that he is struggling, or is this narrative perhaps a little overblown?
I mean, struggling is strong. I don't think he's playing as well as he did. Even I think this regular season for him was not as strong as, 2022-23 in particular. And in this playoff run has probably not had quite the highs thus far that we saw at times from him the last 2 years. The huge game in Milwaukee in 2022 in Game 6 when they were facing elimination, some of the moments he had against Philadelphia last year. And that's fine because the Celtics, whether this is actually the conference finals for them is tough to say. I mean, they just have not been tested, as you alluded to. Like, they have faced opponents. They weren't going to face any opponent who had a record similar to theirs in the Eastern Conference playoffs because they had this record, domination over the rest of the conference, at least in the 30-team era. And then the teams that they have faced have been decimated by injuries over and over again, with Jimmy Butler and Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen in the next round, and now, unfortunately, Tyrese Halliburton against what was a healthy Indiana team other than Benedict Mathurin off the bench coming into this series. So, they haven't needed him to perform at a top 5 level thus far in the playoffs, and I think it's possible that they could win the championship without him performing at a top 5 level, because that's how good the depth is from 1 to 5, maybe even 1 to 7 on this Boston team. But it's going to be a much greater challenge, assuming they get out of this series, whoever they face in the Western Conference. And that probably is going to require some of those moments for Tatum, because the other element of it is, historically, it is more difficult to win series if you don't have the best player in the series. And that's going to be harder for him to do against, whether it's Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert in Minnesota, or Kyrie and Luka Doncic with Dallas. Like, this is a huge step up in terms of star power, because all the stars they've faced other than Bam Adebayo have ended up injured.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that I know that has been talked about quite a bit over the last 2 years with Tatum is kind of his shot selection, and especially late game. And even in Game 1, like the final 5 minutes of regulation, he's just not a factor at all. Overtime, showed back up, worked quite well for the Celtics. They're real lucky they got there. But the shot selection for him in especially late in games, is that something where he is maybe getting unlucky based off how he shot in the mid-range previous to the last couple of years? There's just so much data at this point that, like, no, this is who he is, and he needs to think differently about the shots he's taking? Like, how do you break down kind of his late game shot selection and thus the Celtics' performance in those clutch moments?
Yeah, I mean, this has been an issue for them throughout the last 2 postseasons, when they've won games, it's been in blowout fashion. And when it's gotten close, they've had a more difficult time of things. And, that's whatever he was going to think about it in terms of his shot selection, that's what the Celtics were thinking about when they went out and got Kristaps Porzingis, who gave them this different option late in games when teams start switching everything and the Boston offense can really bog down into a lot of isolations and your turn, my turn for Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And Porzingis gives them this different weapon in these situations, who was one of the most efficient post scorers in the league. I mean, Wizards fans in DC saw his development from a guy who was a bad option in the post much of his time in Dallas to a guy who was a legit weapon in that regard. And now I think the rest of the league is finding out this year, now that he's getting more attention and scrutiny in Boston. And that's why his health, I think, is so paramount for them, not in this series, but going into the finals.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there what's the precedent for this kind of depth that Boston has, where you have a guy like Brown, a second scorer who could go for 40 when Kristaps gets back? He could also do that. We've seen some recent teams, obviously, that have multiple options. Drew Holiday had some massive playoff games in Milwaukee, along with Giannis and Chris Middleton, obviously Murray and Jokic in Denver. There's typically multiple stars on championship teams, but like you said, truly 1 through, at least 3 on like top flight scorers, 1 through 7 overall depth. How does this team stack up with some of the other recent teams that we've seen in that category?
I think that's what gives them the edge, makes them the most talented team, is that, it's really that they can throw out a 5-man lineup at least that is rock solid at both ends of the court. And that's exceedingly difficult to do in the modern NBA. I think one of the factors in the, so-called death of the dynasty, where we're going to have a 6th different champion in the last 6 years, no matter which of these teams win, with Boston is sort of the one constant that's been in, I think 5 of 6, 4 of 6 conference finals, and, has a chance for their second finals appearance, is that it's become more difficult to maintain that depth while you're paying or trading for 2 stars to top your team. So, that's the other side of it. Boston was able to get Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown through the draft picks from the Brooklyn Nets trade. Didn't have to give anything up to get them. They're about to get extraordinarily highly paid with the Supermax that is already locked in for Jaylen Brown. Jason Tatum is qualified, so it's just a matter of when, not if, in his case. But right now, they're not making as much as the LeBron James, the Kevin Durant's, the Steph Curry's. And that's given them the flexibility to go out and add all this depth. And, I think you'd probably have to go back to, the Warriors in the KD era to find this kind of depth 1 through 5. I mean, you didn't even mention Derek White. I thought it was interesting. Rich Paul has an interview today with Chris Haynes on Bleacher Report, and he mentioned the Celtics having 4.5 All-Stars. And I assume Derek White is the half, since he's never actually made it. But, I would have picked him this year. I was amused by that note.
Yeah, I wonder why an agent would perhaps pump up a player. Why could that be, Kevin? Who could possibly say? Kevin Pelton with us here on the Hoffman Show. Last thing on this Eastern Conference series, real quick. If Boston does what we think they'll do, which is roll through the rest of Indiana, especially if Halliburton is out for the rest of this thing, which at this point, I haven't heard anything yet on that front. But either way, they should win this series without too much of a challenge. Does that concern you, I guess, going into the finals to face or to be a team that's not battle tested when we know coming out of the Western Conference is going to be the opposite? Or do you see it as an advantage because maybe they're not as beaten up as some of these teams that have gone through the rock fight that is the Western Conference?
Yeah, I mean, I think game 1 in particular of the finals, assuming it's in Boston, will be really interesting because you will likely have this contrast of them having an extended period off and, not having been challenged at the level of whoever comes out of the West has, having to win 2 series against top teams. And, even I think you could say 3 in either of these cases. Phoenix was a team that they were favored to win the first round. The Clippers weren't the same challenge because of the Kawhi Leonard injury, but still provided probably were a tougher opponent than anyone the Celtics have faced en route to the finals. You might say. So, I harken back to the Cleveland Golden State finals or was sort of a similar situation a lot of those years where Golden State was facing this Western Conference gauntlet and Cleveland was, maybe still in second gear against a lot of Eastern Conference teams in that stretch. And then they went into Oracle Arena at that point for game one, and it was a shock to the system that all of a sudden, they were being tested the way that they were defensively, and it took them a while to adjust. Now, the interesting difference there is, it was not only that they hadn't faced the same level of competition, it was also they were going on the road. Boston gets to stay home. They likely have a huge freshness advantage. I think it probably is beneficial, but maybe we don't see it show up until later in the series when they sort of acclimated to this level of play, and then there's kind of the cumulative fatigue effect starts to bother one of these Western Conference teams, which has fortunately stayed healthy thus far, and other than Maxi Kleber being out for Dallas right now, and that's where Boston's freshness starts to make a difference.
All right, Kevin, it's time for halftime of the teams that are playing. So we'll let them rest for a second before we get to the Western Conference. Someone who's not relevant to the actual game match, the Washington Wizards. A quick Wizards question for you. You're like, where the hell are you going with this? The Cavs fired JB Bickerstaff earlier in the week, and he adds to the coaches available. There hasn't really been a lot of reporting around the Wizards coaching search. We've seen obviously the headlines for the Lakers because the headlines and the Lakers go together like peanut butter and jelly. We know Brian Keefe is going to be in the mix, the interim, but I'm just curious, as someone who's obviously studied Cleveland as a playoff team, like, would Bickerstaff be interesting to you if you were a team on the rebuild like the Washington Wizards?
Yeah, I think he's an interesting fit when you look at the way that he developed that Cleveland core. Darius Garland, had a really difficult rookie season, but has developed tremendously since then, even if this year was a bit of a step back for him. Evan Mobley, his development, hasn't gone as well offensively as we hoped, but has done a nice job, I think, of building a defensive system around his talents and Jared Allen's. It's interesting because JB does seem, tied to a certain style of play in terms of he really likes these bigger front courts, bigger lineups, and we'll see how well that matches up with what Washington is thinking long term. But maybe they're not thinking anything because right now they're kind of still a lump of play waiting to be molded based on the talent that's going to be available to them in the next couple of years here. And of course, it would be appropriate because Bernie Bickerstaff's ties to the Wizards. And would the Wizards even hire a coach if his dad didn't previously coach for the team?
I mean, you are not the first person to bring that up, Kevin. To go from Wes Unseld's kid to Bernie Bickerstaff's kid would be something. You almost wonder if they, at this point, like, they're just trying to do everything different than they used to do, so maybe they intentionally wouldn't. Although I do think, like, listening to Will Dawkins talk, it does feel like play style is really important, and that is going to come from the front office. So unless the coach is coming in with similar principles to what Will and Michael Winger want, I do think it is going to be a tough sell. So if he's got really, really strong thoughts that are different, if what he likes is the same, then, like, yeah, that could work. But I do think it's interesting that we just haven't really heard a lot. And it does feel like the less we hear, the more it might just wind up being Brian Keefe, who once upon a time, I think, was back in Seattle, with the Sonics with Kevin Durant earlier in his career, and then ultimately followed them to Oklahoma City. Kevin Pelton is with us. Okay, back to people who are relevant now in May basketball. Is there, to you, a big advantage anywhere in the Western Conference Finals? We've obviously seen one game. You certainly had some thoughts going in. Some of those may have been confirmed. Some of those may have been debunked. Is there, to you, a blinking red light of a deciding factor that you think will ultimately win out for one team or the other in this series?
So I say this knowing full well that Minnesota could come out and win by 25 points tonight. I wouldn't be surprised. But I think what stood out from game one was really the difficulty that Minnesota had handling Dallas's pick and roll. And, it's a different challenge than they posed a year ago, or certainly 2 years ago when they were in the conference finals, because back then they weren't doing it with a lot of lob threats. And now, having added Daniel Gafford from the Wizards, who's their 2020.
You're welcome, Dallas.
Their 2023 center rotation is very relevant in May right now. Adding Gafford to Derek Lively II, who's been awesome as a rookie, they've got that constant lob threat out there, and that in combination with Luka Doncic and Kyrie's ability to pull up in the mid-range caused a lot of problems for that Minnesota drop coverage. This is what they prefer to play with Rudy Gobert. Gobert can come up to the level of the screen. I think he even can switch at times and, get some stops against Kyrie and Luka. It's not how they want to play, but I think that is something they're going to have to consider. It is interesting, though. You listen to Chris Finch's comments after the game. He talked about their effort level and his disappointment with that. It seemed like he put more on the execution of the scheme than the scheme itself. So maybe we won't see them change it dramatically in game 2. I think that's the most fascinating thing I'm watching for, and what looks like it could be the biggest advantage. I thought it was an incredibly impressive Dallas win. I took Minnesota in 7 coming into this series. Thought it was maybe like a 55-45 proposition. The fact that the Mavericks not only won game 1 on the road, but won it shooting as poorly from 3 as they did, to me was very encouraging for Dallas's chances of winning this series. Now, we have seen the history, other than Minnesota against Denver in the last round, where the teams that lose game 1 at home almost always win game 2. They typically win it in lopsided fashion. So I think the odds are very good. We'll be 1-1 going to Dallas, but I do think at this point that, even just getting the one game and the way that they did makes me think that the Mavericks are now the favorite in this series.
It's interesting to hear Finch talk about it like that too, because Dallas shot, you probably know the actual number, but it might have been the lowest percent of threes that they took in a game all year. If not, it was like, third, it was bottom 5, if not the actual fewest percentage of threes that they took all year in a game. And to me, if I'm Finch, I'm like, scheme worked. They took the shots that we wanted. They took tough mid-rangers. They took tough floaters. They just got dudes who can hit them, and we can't think of better shots than that for them to take, because we're not going to give up these corner threes. We're not going to give up the shots that they want to get. And so I also just wonder if he's kind of saying that to maybe get a little bit more out of his guys, but also because he knows that if they play this out over 7 games, even guys as skilled as Kyrie and Luka probably aren't going to be able to win basketball games based off of mid-range, long mid-range twos and really tough floaters over the 4-time defensive player of the year.
So I think Dallas can do it, because I think that's where their defensive improvement, which is the other element since they added Gafford and Washington at the trade deadline, it has transformed them defensively. And really that's where they won that game, I think, more so than the offensive end. To me, it's the lobs to Gafford and Lively that are the concern there more than the Kyrie and Luka mid-rangers. But I will say, like, Kyrie is 1 of 1 is, a difficult contested shot maker. Luka's not far behind him, so I think they can win the series without it in conjunction with their defense. But yeah, that's a good point, because it was the opposite of, I think, what we saw a lot in that Oklahoma City series, where the Thunder, by sending 2 to the ball, were shutting down Kyrie and Luka on a regular basis, but it was freeing up PJ Washington to make a ton of threes. It was freeing up Josh Green to get a bunch of open corner threes, and that's sort of how they lost that series.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the Mavs defense. Last thing on this series real quick. I thought the most interesting stat that I heard was, I think it was from Zach Lowe on his pod. It was definitely on his pod. I don't remember if it was him or his guest, but saying that Anthony Edwards' depth of shot was like 22.7 feet, which the simpler version is, look at the box score. He took 12 of his 16 shots from 3. And so I am fascinated at how Dallas was able to do that, how to keep him out of the paint to that level, but also how sustainable that is over the course of a 7-game series.
Yeah, it's interesting, because the other thing, I didn't get to watch that game live because I was covering the Seattle Storm game that night. I got it streaming in the background.
More on that in a moment, as they say in the business.
Yeah, tease. But I went back and rewatched the second half yesterday, and it was interesting to hear in real time, Reggie Miller and Stan Van Gundy were all over the fatigue element for Anthony Edwards, and how much that was, affecting his willingness to drive as opposed to settling for threes. And, those aren't bad shots for him. He made some of them in the fourth to help them come back and get in position to potentially win. But I think if you're Dallas, you're a lot more comfortable with him shooting those shots than getting into the paint and breaking down your defense that way.
No doubt. Kevin Pelton with us here on the Hoffman Show, one of the best basketball writers out there, working for ESPN. And you were covering the Seattle Storm and Indiana Fever the other night. Yet another loss for Caitlin Clark and Indiana. I'm just curious, like, watching her in person in the W, getting to see some of the good, some of the bad of her in that game, and this new Seattle core coming together. Like, as you walk out of the arena that night, what's the thing that kind of stuck with you?
Yeah, it was a really really fun game, for two teams that came into it a combined 1-7, and we think both of them are going to be better than this. I think Indiana's right there. The last two losses by a combined 6 points. Their execution hasn't been where it needed to be. They had, Caitlin Clark had multiple turnovers in the final minute after coming into it with only one all game. Had sort of, licked what had been her biggest issue, I think, in the first 4 games as a pro. So, that was a positive development, but you need to see it for the full 40 instead of just for 39. There was a stretch in the late third quarter after Nika Mule checked in for the Storm to make her WNBA debut. There had been so much talk about the way that she defended Caitlin at UConn in the semifinals and the Final Four. And this time, Caitlin Clark, kind of got going against her, had a crossover into a step back 3, then found her teammates streaking down the court in transition, got to the basket for a layup. It was like, okay, this is what we saw at Iowa. I'd even seen on that same court when she advanced to the Final Four as a junior, winning the regional semifinals and finals in Seattle. And she said afterwards, like, the challenge for me is learning how to do that for a full game. And it's not going to be, that level of dominance for a full 40 minutes against WNBA opposition. But, she's got the potential to do that on a regular basis. And I think it's coming together a little bit. The interesting question for Indiana is so much attention on Caitlin's performance thus far, but last year's number 1 pick, Aaliyah Boston, has really struggled. She was someone I had on my all WNBA ballot as a rookie. That's how good she was from day one. And she just doesn't look the same physically right now. So, whether it's working back into shape or whatever it is, they need to get her going.
Yeah, I saw a couple folks on Twitter basically go, I'm not worried about Aaliyah Boston yet, but I'm getting to the point that I'm wondering how long until I need to be worried about Aaliyah Boston, because she has really, really struggled. And I got questions about the coaching on that team, and I know it always feels like lazy media analysis when you immediately just are like, blame the coach. But they just feel, watching them, Kevin, on television, so unprepared on how to create the shots that they want. And Caitlin will go on these individual streaks of brilliance. You'll have a couple other players that have done that as well. They run the floor well. Like, there are elements obviously there. They're a professional basketball team. Like, they're good at basketball and will be in stretches. It's not all going to be bad. But it does seem like that there's just a level of disorganization with the Fever that does reflect a team that doesn't have a clear identity and vision for how they want to play. And I know they're young, but like, that was a known commodity coming into the year, and it feels like they're underprepared even by that standard.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you're going to speak in favor of Christie sides in Indiana, like, the challenge is, by the time that we actually were paying attention to Caitlin Clark at Iowa, they had already gone through this process through much of her freshman season and made that run in the NCAA tournament. Because, unless you were following the Big Ten closely, I don't think you really had watched Caitlin until that NCAA tournament run. And nobody had done it in person, probably, or, a handful of people, because that was the COVID year. So they got to do that kind of behind closed doors, whereas, like, all the attention and scrutiny is on the Fever as they go through this process right now. And I was more optimistic coming into the season. I figured that they would probably be a playoff team, and similar a little bit to Brianna Stewart's rookie year here in Seattle, where they were around 500, but got hot late in the season. And, I do think maybe I underestimated the challenge in terms of just figuring out the style of play, because Caitlin is so different from anyone else in the league.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And they have gotten better. So I think the trajectory is good, but they definitely need to get on. Along with our Mystics here in D.C., would like to find one in the W column. I feel like the Mystics have lost 3 or 4 straight games by 2 points. It's been a rough go for the team from D.C., who's actually out there on the West Coast right now. Kevin Pelton, where's the best place to send people to find your stuff? Because you got your NBA Twitter, you got your W Twitter, you got ESPN.com, you got all the things. What would you like to send the people, Kevin?
Yeah, ESPN.com I think is the best place, and then I'm actually not using either Twitter anymore, but I am on Blue Sky.
You're a smarter man than me.
Where there are dozens of us.
Yes. Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com. Thank you, sir. Always appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that is Kevin Pelton from ESPN.com. Sorry for the mic trouble there, getting Kevin's levels straight, but hope the analysis came through loud and clear for you. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, Clinton Yates will join us talking more about the NBA playoffs and whether or not this Jason Tatum narrative has gotten a little out of control.
Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And on Fridays, we're joined by my good friend Clinton Yates, of course, host of ESPN Daily and frequently featured on Around the Horn. Sometimes he even hosts it. He'll throw a balled up piece of paper at your camera all day. What's up?
Very true. I also happen to host, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I host a podcast called Never Tell Me the Odds on ESPN. I'm holding up a mic flag, which means we are officially a real show. I went to the premiere of The Acolyte last night in Hollywood, and we had mic flags, so that was cool.
That's very cool. I actually have thought about, because I have an old somewhere around here, 106.7 The Fan mic flag that does fit neatly on this microphone, but I don't, while I work for the company and in the building with 106.7 The Fan, my show is not on it, and thus it would be weird for me to have the 106.7 The Fan mic flag on the home setup microphone.
That would be faking the funk to a certain degree, but the reason I brought this up is because guess who joined us on the red carpet for the premiere of The Acolyte? Oh, that would be the Larry O'Brien trophy. That's just gallivanting across the nation. So I interviewed Larry. We did a couple bits, and
how were Larry's answers?
Well, he's more of the strong but silent type, from my understanding. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of stoicism in his approach. But yeah, it was fun. It's like a mascot that doesn't move.
As opposed to, on the opposite coast, we got Ellie there with the New York Liberty, which, by the way, I did not know that Ellie was named after the fact that they had elephants that tested out the Brooklyn Bridge to make sure it wasn't going to collapse. That's an amazing stat.
Have elephants. That's P.T. Barnum's greatest bit of all time. And that guy has pulled off some of the wackiest stunts in the history of the world. We're on a total sidebar here, but I do not care. The Greatest Showman, that movie, right? That's loosely about P.T. Barnum's life. I'm stunned they didn't have part of the elephant scene in that movie somehow. It's literally one of the most important things that dude did in American history, and he did a lot. Look it up, kiddos. He even tried to run for president. P.T. Barnum is not just a circus goer. This guy was a maniac on a lot of levels. That, to me, was the greatest and biggest stunt he'd ever pulled in his life. Can you imagine had it gone wrong? We're not talking about Evel Knievel. This is a different level of operation.
No. Also, there's definitely a joke right in front of us, something about a guy who ran a circus running for president, and just the general politics here as I sit in the District of Columbia. But I would like to have my job when I get back to work on Monday. All right, let's get into the sports ball. Let's get into the Boston Celtics, who win last night, 126-110. And they do it despite the fact that for large sections of this game, Jason Tatum is not playing excellent basketball. Now, they get away with it because Jaylen Brown drops a 40-burger. But, Clinton, Jason Tatum has not been particularly good these playoffs. And the Celtics have been oddly unsatisfying these playoffs. But they're also up 2-0 in the Eastern Conference Finals and have barely dropped any games. So I struggle to make sense of this. Can you help me?
Me too. And I actually wanted to ask you how you feel about the perception of Jason Tatum. I think we're at that point now where you can look at him and where he came from. I mean, in terms of being a high-profile guy out of Duke, third overall pick, goes to the Celtics, massive market, and people just kind of assume, because he happens to have a little bit of a personal obsession with Kobe, that he's going to turn into a sort of bigger, stronger, faster version of Kobe with the wavy hair. Like, that hasn't happened. And for whatever reason, people can't seem to get out of this box. Well, the reason being that they haven't won an NBA title, don't get me wrong. But the thing that I think about all the time is, do you want this team to win, or do you want Jason Tatum to look like what you want him to look like and win? Are you trying to have your cake and eat it too? And as it were for last night, okay, he doesn't look great, but they out-hustled the hell out of the Pacers in that game. They had like 5 offensive rebounds on the first possession of the game. Like, maybe, just maybe, from a roster construction standpoint, Jason Tatum doesn't need what you think he needs to look like to beat teams. Now, don't get me wrong, Gregory. They're injury-prone all over the East. They've kind of had a little bit of a cakewalk to this point in the playoffs, but I am very, very intrigued by this idea that Jason Tatum is somehow not maximizing who he is, but the Celtics seem to keep winning, and it's not going wrong. I think an example I would use quickly, Craig, is remember Anthony Davis those first couple years for the Pelicans? About the first couple years, I mean, 7 of them, where they never won except for one playoff series, and you thought, okay, well, maybe, even though he's made a couple, all NBA teams, being the best player on his team just isn't the formula in order to try to get this guy to a title. I wouldn't have a problem with that with Jason Tatum. I get it. He's 3-time All-NBA first team, blah, 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 but he doesn't do the voting. I don't do the voting. I know what I think of Jason Tatum and what he can be, and it seems like the Celtics are doing fine.
Yeah, it's weird. And the Davis comparison, I think, is interesting because I think the collective media NBA fan sphere looks at those two guys and is like, these are players that are capable potentially being the best player in the NBA. And thus you have the Michael Jordan, LeBron, like level of carrying a team expectation. Like, can you do that? And realistically, I think they're probably like one step below. And I think especially for Davis, because he was such a unanimous number one pick. Like, he was the next guy. And he, for as great as he has been, and there have been times, like stretches of seasons where he's been the best player in the league, few and far between, but it's happened, where he just actually hasn't been that, but he's still a Hall of Famer. And like Tatum's kind of the same way, where it's like, yeah, this is one of the 10 best players in the league. He is consistently floating somewhere between probably like 4 and 6, which is really good. He also is on a team that's loaded in a conference that stinks. And so all those things can be true, and we're just not used to all those things actually being true. But at the same time, like this bad Jason Tatum that we're seeing is averaging like 27 points a game in the playoffs. Like, he's 23 points last night. It's not a great stat line. He's 1 of 7 from 3. He's got 4 turnovers. But at the end of the day, like 9 of 20 shooting is not a horrendous night. He had 36 points and 12 rebounds in game 1. You know, to close out the Cavs series, he's almost got a 25-point triple-double. He's 25, 10, and 9. So, like, what are we really talking about here? And I think the answer to that question, though, is like, okay, but what happens when you face the Western Conference champion in the finals and you need to be 32, 10, and 6 a night on efficient shooting with 2 turnovers or less to win an NBA championship? And I think that is the question, is can he reach that? Or even with the Celtics team, like, does he have to? And those might be 2 separate questions.
I think you're right on all those counts, but I want to get back to the one point I was making, which is when he was drafted is important here. I think it was 2018, 2017, whatever it was. Like, we were still very much entrenched in this idea of, you got your one guy, you got your big 3. That's how you build a basketball team, and that's how we're going to do it. How many teams have tried and failed to do that in the last 5 seasons? Just didn't work. Blew up. It's happened on 2 different Kevin Durant teams. And you look at the teams that have won it, which are the Nuggets and perhaps the Bucks, where it was a little different. Their big 3s weren't exactly big 3s. They built actual teams. They weren't just trying to plug and play these formulas. And I feel that there's a mini akin comparison here to these NFL teams that are still in the mindset of, well, you got to find a guy and pay him $1 gazillion as the quarterback and everything else will work itself out. In the NBA, I think the formulas for how to get to the top are switching a little bit. And perhaps the Celtics are kind of that last bastion of a squad that got stuck with a guy. They were like, well, we picked him. You're the guy, so be the guy, as opposed to, hey, we're going to do some more than just have you be the guy.
Yeah, I think the NBA is in a weird spot historically now. I'm going to put my historian hat on, which ironically is a plus 44 hat. So the NBA from basically 1960, which is when we all start counting, through 2020, had one era of true parity, right? The 70s, there's like late 70s, post Bill Russell, post Wilt, post Jerry West, post all those guys. There's this 5-6 year period where there's not repeat champions. It's when the Bullets win the championship, obviously. The Sonics win a championship. It's just kind of random. Magic and Bird come in the 80s, and it's like Magic, Bird, Hakeem, MJ, Isaiah Thomas, like Dr. J, and then obviously the guys in the 2000s, and there's like 10 guys that account for every NBA championship from outside of the 04 Pistons and the 2011 Mavs from 1980 to 2020. And by the way, if you say NBA Finals participants, that those two, because Dirk beat LeBron and the 04 Pistons beat Shaq and Kobe. What's happened now, though, is we're in this unprecedented outside of that late 70s stretch of parity. And my question is, are we just in between the LeBron, Steph, and Wemby going to resume NBA normalcy very, very soon because he is going to be that much better than everyone else? Or is the talent pool now wider because the game is globalized and we have the best players in the world coming from different places. And America certainly will add another candidate to the list in the next decade. But there's just more great players, and thus we are actually entering a true NBA, let's call it 3.0, 1940 whatever to 1960, 1.0, 60 to basically 2020, 2.0. And then now we're entering this globalized version of the game that is actually going to create parity for the end of time.
I think that's an excellent breakdown, and I think it also has to do with how we view what I'll just call legacy Twitter, which is, are we going to basically gauge all of what we think of players by rings alone, because we're talking about a completely different index in terms of talent in the league? Are we ever going to win 6 titles again? Like, think about this earnestly. Do you think you're ever going to see a player do that statistically in your life ever again, Craig? Probably
I mean, Victor Wembanyama seems like he's got a pretty good shot.
Okay, but Victor Wembanyama is one player in a league that has a lot of players that are really, really good, as you just pointed out, and the path to a title is just a different thing now based on that level of talent. And so if we're only judging guys by rings in terms of success, which I think this sounds crazy to call it an old metric, but you see my point here.
Yeah,
it is possible
I don't
to be
think it's wrong.
An excellent player, a quality player in this league without having XYZ number of championships, because there's just that many good dudes. What are you going to do? You play the games for a reason. So I think Tatum is caught right in the middle of when our mindset kind of shifted on what makes you actually of value to an NBA team versus what makes you of value to like a fan base or whatever. And I'm not rooting for the Celtics, but I'm just saying that, like, you know, I sort of feel like if Tatum ends up being a guy that gets one in this mix, I'm not going to feel like, oh, they stole one from somebody. Like, no, they're good. And if they get a chance to get up there and they get one, that would make sense to me, being present for the time that this actually happened.
No, the Celtics, if they get Porzingis back and KP looks like KP, like, they're the best team. Even though they played in the junior varsity and like their record is inflated because of the playing in the Eastern Conference, like, you give me the Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kristaps Porzingis. That's the best 5 in the league. So we'll obviously see if he can get back. Game 4 is the reported earliest for that. And Boston now has a 2-0 lead headed to Indiana, where, of course, the Pacers have basically not lost all playoffs long, if not literally not lost all playoffs long. Clinton Yates with us on the Hoffman Show. I'm going to stick around for one more segment, because if that was too nuanced and historical for you, we have the current world's dumbest sports argument to talk about next.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.
Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Clinton Yates with us for another few minutes here. So the world's current dumbest sports argument feels like we have people yelling over each other that I think all have points, but also, you know, maybe the start of it is just flying over everyone's head. The start of it is essentially LeBron James on his new podcast with JJ Redick talking about Caitlin Clark. And I think saying like, hey, I understand what it's like to be the face of a league. And, you know, I understand the pressure she's under and ultimately being complimentary of Clark while also maybe taking some small digs at other people who have not been complimentary of Clark. Charles Barkley then Charles Barkley's it and just goes on a full Chuckster minute-long, comical tirade.
I think tirade is fair in the situation.
Yeah, saying, hey, women, which is genuinely a comical tirade because he's like, don't be like us men. Men are petty. Men are the worst, which, yep, Chuck nailed that part.
Facts.
About Caitlin Clark, no jealousy, please. And then I thought the person who most had a point and nail on the head is your colleague at ESPN, Elle Duncan, who's just like, what do you guys want? Like, what do you want the other players to like roll out a red carpet for Caitlin Clark to drive to the basket every time and bow and kiss the ring because they now have charter flights? Like, what are we doing here? But I think it's just an interesting thing that's happened because I love, as you do, Clinton, as people who have been genuinely following women's sports for a long time, to see women's sports getting the attention. But I hate that the dumbest parts of men's sports discourse have now made their way to the women's game as well. Why couldn't we have left those behind and brought the good parts?
Do you remember a couple weeks ago when that Greg Doyle situation happened and I tweeted that thread about the thing that's going to suck the most is these dudes in prominent media positions where when they are not centered in their voices are going to have a problem simply not being part of the group of people that we care about what they think. This is all an outcrop of that, in my opinion, not about any individual person. LeBron James, obviously one of the greatest basketball players of all time, if not the greatest in my household. Charles Barkley, dream teamer. This is not in question. But the general idea that what kind of randos from around the sports universe think about the interworking machinations of the WNBA, man, it's going to be hard for us to get over that. Like, half these people don't have any idea how this league works and don't care to, simply want to make comments about what they see or what they hear. And that's fine. A lot of us do that. But again, I don't want to get too far into the historical bag, but if we start doing comparisons about where leagues were at the time of their existence versus other leagues, NBA, NFL, I'm looking at you, WNBA far ahead of most of these leagues when it comes to how well they were taken and understood in the country. So, like, look, does Caitlin Clark deserve a lot of credit because people finally paid attention to the plight of female athletes traveling to play sports? Sure. Is Caitlin Clark going to step out onto the court and probably get her behind handed to her because grown women are trying to win basketball games and make paychecks? Yes. Is this the fun part? Absolutely. All right. If Angel Reese is going to be out here winning games and tweeting about her or tweeting about planes and stuff, this is the smoke we're here for. What are we doing? This is exactly what I want. Humans competing at the highest level, talking about it for us and our entertainment. I'm not sure what else the goal is, Gregory, other than what we're looking at right now. Saying that people don't have enough deferential treatment to X person or Y player. We're grown-ups. What are we doing? You know? Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. One, this is the least important thing, but I'm just going to get it out of the way first. I love what Angel's doing. I love like how she's playing, the fact she's been able to come in. Her game is translated well. Like, excellent. Yep. I think long-term, it would be good for Angel if Angel was a little less online. Okay. That's something sure. I think for all of us, we could all use to be 10% less online. But God, that has got to be an energy.
But that's where she's making her money, Gregory. Yeah. That's why she's famous. That's why people know who she is. She talks that talk.
She does. She's got a lot of room for her haters, though. And if that's what fuels her, it works. It's working for her. So
engagement is half the battle. She's driving around in a daggone G-Wagon.
And to her credit, she's monetizing it.
Yes,
I do a stupid radio segment called Never Read the Comments every week that's making me squadoosh extra dollars. She's rolling around in a G-Wagon. What do I know? You want to know what, Angel? I'm an idiot. Keep doing your thing. I think that going back to like the original thing here with Barkley, like I think that to Elle's point, if people haven't seen Elle Duncan's rant, worth your time, go find it. But like to Elle's point,
Charles would have a point if he had a point, right? Like, no, there have been very few WNBA players, if any, that have had anything remotely negative to say about Caitlin Clark. And like some of the things that have been quote unquote negative, like some people want to bring up Asia Wilson, who just got a shoe deal despite the fact that she's been the best player on earth for 3 years. And Caitlin came in the league with one. Asia saying like, yeah, part of Caitlin's success is because she's white. It's like, yeah, hello. Like, that's not to say that Caitlin's not an incredible player. Like Caitlin, the records that she broke in college didn't get broken because she got bonus points for being white, but the attention she got,
Can you
and
imagine,
the fact
by
that
the way?
Hey,
4-pointer.
Sorry, it's basketball. We seem to not be favored here. So when we shoot from beyond, you're right. You're giving me the what? No,
totally distracted us on that tangent. My bad.
Sorry, only we get the Ruffles line. If you know, you know. Anyway, the point is that absolutely the attention is enhanced by the fact that it is a more comfortable watch for a larger number of people. Do with that statement what you want. If you're mad at it, oh well. So at the end of the day, like, there just hasn't, if that's the harshest thing, is like a simple fact that, by the way, amongst other people who would acknowledge that would include Caitlin Clark. Like, Asia's teammate Kelsey Plum has openly talked about this with her own shoe deal with Under Armour, et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's not really hating on Caitlin Clark. Like, that's actually, if it's hating on anything, it's the larger atmosphere that we exist in that Asia has to say that in the first place. And so at the end of the day, like, if there was this large group of people that were just hating on Caitlin Clark all the time, Chuck might have a point. He doesn't have a point because that group of people doesn't exist.
Strawman. That'd be a great team name for like a team in a league. Call your team the Strawmen and just see what kind of people show up as your fans. That'd be awesome.
That would be good. This is actually the team that should face the Harlem Globetrotters.
Exactly. That's a good call, by the way.
Where should they be from?
Probably DC. The single best part about the WNBA right now, and for my personal enjoyment, of course, is like Big Ellie turning into, like, people finally realizing how great of a character Big Ellie is, and it gives us the resurgence of one of the most ridiculous songs in the history of all time, which is LL Cool J's Head Sprung. They call me Big Ellie. Like, no, they don't. They don't call you that, Todd. Nobody calls you Big Ellie. My grandma watches you on NCIS or whatever show that is every single night. But Ellie's the best.
By the way, this is a segment we should do at some point this summer.
Okay.
Most transformational rappers, and by transformational I mean LL into being a TV star on a like NCIS comedy. We got Snoop doing kids records, and he's going to be a coach on The Voice next season.
Yeah, that's true. Will Smith is obviously the OG of that on some level. Ice-T is obviously still big. But let me tell you, let me leave you with this, kiddos. You know who did not do that and who should have done that and is going to regret every day that they did make that transition into real showbiz life, and instead they're too busy rapping on microphones, making fools of themselves? All together, kids. BBL Drizzy. BBL Drizzy. BBL Drizzy. Goodbye, Gregory.
Goodbye. Listen to Clinton on ESPN Daily and do it daily.
Daily.
Let's get into some of the plays that we saw, some of the concepts, and some of the big picture stuff that we started to see starting. Excellent work, Anthony. Excellent work. We're just going to leave. No one needs to know why it's such good work. Just excellent work out of you. It's the Hoffman Show, starting the final hour on a Friday with Beyonce here on the Team 980. What more could someone ask for? Coming up at 6:30, the Spirit play at 7:30 tonight. Casey Kruger, their star defender, got a chance to chat with her earlier in the week, fresh off her being named to the U.S. Women's National Team for their June camp. You'll hear that interview at 6:30. But right now, little Commanders for you. Take command. We broke down the OTA session. Week 2, of course, this week. Week 3 is next week. We'll have more on that, next week. We talked in the podcast about Jaden Daniels. We also talked about the defense, but the part we will play for you right here, right now, is the part that talks about everyone on the offense that is not Jaden Daniels. Of course, you can subscribe to Take Command wherever you get your pods, but for right now, all you got to do is listen. Let's get into some of the plays that we saw, some of the concepts, and some of the big picture stuff that we starting to see from this offense. I think it's interesting. Brian Robinson yesterday was asked by JP about kind of what's different this year offensively, and he's like, "Look, I don't want to give away too much." Always a good, smart thing to say for you offensive players out there. But he's like, "We'll be more up tempo. I think we're going to be a lot more no huddle." So we know that is going to functionally change. But as you start to look at some of the X's and O's, and I get the good fortune of peeking over your shoulder at your notes and you're drawing up plays on your roster and stuff. How familiar is some of this stuff to you, and how much is different and maybe coming from the air raid tree and stuff that Cliff is bringing?
Well, I think a lot of it is from the air raid tree, but like we've talked about before, like the air raid is the NFL now. Like they're kind of intertwined in terms of concepts and how they execute. And so you're going to get high-low concepts. You're going to get floods. You're going to get zone overloads. You're going to get, zone beaters. And it's just about how formationally do they get to them. And I think one of the things that's, again, the advantage of the air raid is that you can go hurry up, because the offense is, I don't want to say simple because that sounds like I'm being pejorative to the air raid, but it allows you to play fast, right? It's like, these are the concepts. I can signal everything. I can sometimes change the play at the line of the scrimmage to a concept that I want versus the coverage that I'm seeing, which is great. So I think it gives the quarterback a lot of autonomy. It gives the coordinator a lot of autonomy, especially if they're getting up to line of scrimmage quickly. You can be like, "Hey man, let's check let's check the two receiver side to this concept." And I felt like, I don't know if this actually happened, but I felt like in the practice I was like, "Oh, like I wonder if they switch this concept to kind of maximize this coverage, for the offense." So I think basically, long story short, you see drive, You see like chair, you see all the normal stuff you'd see in an offense, but just how they're getting to it from a tempo standpoint is the thing that I think makes it unique. And I think that's good because ultimately, like what that tempo does is it simplifies defenses because it makes it harder for the defensive coordinator calls defense. So, for example, when I was here in 2012, we had a lot of these similar concepts in a lot of similar packages, right? We called it the Apache package, which was like not 2-minute, but not regular offense. It was like a hurry up type of thing, like an Apache helicopter. And it simplifies defenses. So it goes from you're getting exotic blitzes, you're getting stunts, to you're getting cover two. You're getting cover two every single time. And so as an offensive player, it's awesome. You know what I mean? It's really easy to be like, okay, great, we're doing that. And I think when you look at, play calling, if you can stress the defense in that way, it makes it so much easier for you. So I think that's something that really sticks out to me. And I think, again, the quarterbacks have done a really good job executing it.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else specifically from the plays or some of the concepts, some of the players, the way they're running things that you wanted to point out before we shift to the guys who weren't running plays yesterday, the big fellas who continued to go through a bunch of drills and I know we want to talk about as well.
Yeah, I think, obviously Terry McLaurin's big catch up the sideline, like just the in the drop back game, again, maybe this is something that's happening around the NFL that I just have not been paying attention to. Just their ability to just hit goes consistently in practice has been pretty impressive to me. The one to Jahan, the one to Terry, the one to Diami, like very impressive. And I think the one to Terry, like it just shows you again, like the flexibility of hurrying up, right? They're kind of running like this, like little, I don't know if it was an out and up or like a stutter and go, but like he gets Benjamin St. Juste, and I think Marcus Mariota delivers a really nice ball to Terry. So, you have these receivers, these playmakers that can, be dynamic down the field, and it's nice to see them getting down the field in like normal drop back stuff, which is great to see. So I love that. We talked about the play to Jahan already. Another guy that stuck out to me a little bit was Bryson Tremaine. I mean, every time I watch him, like he's big, he's fast, he's physical. Like there was a little high-low concept where the back runs up and runs like a little 5-yard sit and then breaks out. He's running like a 10-yard speed cut in. And the timing from the quarterback to deliver the ball, the ability of Bryson to put his foot in the ground, catch that football was great. The guy that's just been really impressive day in and day out to me is Zach. Again, it's like tight end nuance weirdness, but it's like I understand, like he understands stems, he understands leverages, he understands how to break the defense's leverages, and he's not running 1,000 miles an hour, but just the maturity of him, I think, has just been awesome to watch. Like the professionalism of him, and a guy that might be a Hall of Fame tight end, but you can see why. Like just the detail. And again, he's not burning your face off with vertical speed, but it's like the Jason Witten stuff. Like everyone watches Jason Witten and is like, oh, this guy's super average. But he knows the dark arts.
Gets open.
He knows the dark arts of running routes. He knows he knows coverages. He knows how to break the coverages. He knows where the space is, and it's just such a valuable tool. Like Zach had a little corner, like they were clearing out. He's running a corner, and just his stem to kind of push the safety and hold that hook player, hold the safety, then break back out to make the throw easier for the quarterback. It's cool to see that, and so there's a lot of guys doing a good job on the offensive side of the football. Another one that stuck out to me on the defensive side. Do you want to wait on that, or we're talking about that now?
Yeah, let's wait on defense for a second because I got a couple notes on a couple of those guys real quick.
Yeah.
One, just going in reverse order here. Like it's funny because Zach was such a great athlete when he was younger. And I'm sure he had a lot more fluidity to him. And watching him run now, like it does feel very herky-jerky, like kind of classic white guy tight end. And yet he still finds his way to get open. And like he, as you said, like he just understands the leverages and the dark arts of how to do it. And I covered Witten in Dallas when I was down there, and I hadn't thought about that connection, but like there just is a know-how to get the job done. And I just also can't help but think how much fun it must have been to cover Zach in Philly when he was 24 years old and probably knew, some of this stuff and had a feel for it, but also was like just burning guys with speed and some of the ability to juke guys out. But it is kind of fun to watch him for sure. The other thing I'll say about Terry real quick, that play, the deep ball down the sideline, he came back to the sideline and was chirping because he was like, oh yeah, I guess BSJ had said like, oh, we're on it. Like we're on that route. And BSJ thought it was an out, and Terry kind of hit him with a little shake to the outside, gets up, gets vertical on him. And he's like, yeah, I told him we got something for that. We got something for that. And so just the competitive juices, but I think just generally, and John Allen talked about this yesterday too, like these guys are having fun. Like last year, there was an intensity to it with EB, and obviously everyone kind of felt the pressure, of knowing what that season meant for Rivera, and Sam's got all this pressure on him, and there's just it wasn't light and it wasn't fun, and not that they're not being serious. Like Tremaine got not an earful, but like got a talking to from Dan Quinn about lining up faster. Like they're on it, they're on the details. In that Tremaine thing was in the 2 minute, and he didn't get set fast enough for DQ's liking. So Dan was like, "Hey, dude, like this is how it's gonna be. Letting you know, like get it done. Okay, cool. We'll keep it moving." But watching Terry just like have fun is really cool. And John talked about like I didn't necessarily want to go through another rebuild, and then I talked to AP, and now I'm on board, and now being here, like I really love coming to work every day. And he said, we got a lot of work to do. I know we got to win games, and there's a long way to go. But for right now, I'm having fun coming to work. And so the ability to both be effective, but also like have fun playing ultimately a game, and creating that kind of perfect atmosphere to learn and grow together as a team. I hats off to the coaches, and we're getting to see it more on the offensive side just because the field that the offense is practicing on is right there for us. But I'm sure this is happening on the defensive side too. But just hat tip to DQ and the staff for seeing that, and to see Terry, a guy that I've known since he was a rookie, like genuinely having a blast competing when that's kind of been gone the last couple of years to this level, I think is great. And, you like to see good things happening to good people, and Terry certainly qualifies for that.
No, I think that's 100% right. And I think that's a great point too, because I've never really Terry will talk and he'll be energetic, but nothing like that yesterday, And I think it just speaks to the environment that they've cultivated, and they do the energy drill, and I just the sidelines got a little bit more juice, and I know that's something that Dan has emphasized. Like he's emphasized that when I played with him in Atlanta, and obviously like Pete Carroll, that's something he brought, and obviously Dan worked under him, but like the coaches are juiced, right? There's Jahan makes that great play on the sideline, and every player goes, like every player's like, yeah, Jahan, yeah, one, and then all the coaches are like, great, they're dapping him up, and that level of energy just wasn't there from the team. And you mentioned Dan, like you remember he's sitting there, kind of where the center is in 7-on-7, watching the defensive calls, looking how guys line up. He's kind of working the drill himself, and just for him to be that locked in is cool, because it allows him to go up to Bryson and be like, hey man, get set. Like, hey man, we're competing, we're ready to get after people. Let's get up and get set, because he's locked into practice. And I think it's a testament to him, testament to the staff, and it is cool. It's fun to go watch. And a little bit of it's all new, it's all novel, but I know that the type of guys you bring in affect that, right? And so the energy of Joe Witt, like the way that he coaches, his like how he's talking with the guys, how Gay, the defensive back coach, he's constantly making corrections, and constantly, that is infectious, and I think it helps cultivate this environment. So as much as last year was tough because everyone kind of knew the score and it was tough to be excited about anything, I do think that the coaching and the philosophy here have led to this really fun environment to watch. And again, it's still early, so we're not making any declarative statements about anything, but I do think it's led to a practice and an environment that's more fun to work in for the guys.
Yeah, and last thing on that too, I think they're also, the way they're rotating players really helps with this as well. Yeah. Because I feel like in most practices I've seen in my almost 10 years of covering the league have been like, the ones go, and then they're sitting for a long time. Yeah. And the way they're rotating guys in is like Terry and Jahan, for instance, like the quarterbacks will kind of have that rotation, right? Where it's like one's up for their series of plays. But let's say Marcus is the quarterback. Terry and Jahan run like 2-3 plays, and then they rotate those guys out, and the next group of receivers comes in. And the defensive guys, all 7 of them, are rotating in kind of that same way. And then eventually the quarterback rotates, and Jaden's in, and Terry and Jahan and them are back up. And so keeping guys involved, it's kind of that basketball concept of like, hey, we got to get our big man a shot every now and then, make sure he's engaged on the defensive end. Like just it's small details. I don't even know if that's on purpose, but it does seem like a kind of a better rhythm to practice that I would think as a player I would enjoy way more, because I'm not like running 7 plays, then being like, okay, let me go take my helmet off and take a knee on the sideline for 6 minutes, sweltering in the heat and then have to go run some more routes again. It's like I'm up every 3 to 4 plays and I'm mentally engaged because I don't have time to turn it off.
And I think that's the other thing with the tempo, and whether or not how much they use that in season, but like when you have a tempoed offense, it leads to that, right? Because you got like guys will get their 3 reps and it's not, it's not a minute and 30 seconds or 3 minutes to get those plays in. It's like, hey man, we've done our 3 plays. And so as you're watching practice, sometimes it's kind of hard because it's just turning over so quick, but I think that's great because it keeps guys engaged. It's building conditioning. They're not out there for hours, but they're still getting a lot of reps in, which is great. So.
Yeah. Last thing on the offense, O-line. Still doing, positional drills. They're working combination drills, so it's not like all individual one-on-one, so to speak. But there's no team stuff involving the O-line yet. So how much can you take and what did you take out of what they did yesterday? Then we'll flip over to the defense.
Yeah, so I think the thing that you're looking for in those drills is just how guys move, and specifically Brandon Coleman. Like he's a guy that people have been talking a lot about. And so in the pass rush drill, they do this drill where there's like 2 people. If you've coached high school football or been to any kind of offensive line clinic, this is like a staple drill. There's one guy running kind of right down the middle of the offensive lineman and one guy that's like 3 yards off. And so he's got a kick to the wide guy, post back down, and he's punching both bags, and they're kind of working their way back. And so in that drill, you're just kind of, for me, obviously you're evaluating technique, but like I just want to see how guys move, And so I think it's the first time they've done that drill. It's the first time I've seen them do the drill. So there were some technical issues with some of the guys in terms of drill execution. They're leaning over on the punch. But the one thing I took out of it is like Brandon Coleman has pretty sweet feet. And I think like there's a little bit of a technical issue with his punch. Like he kind of gets like a little stiff-legged when he punches, which you don't want to see. You kind of want to see the feet be independent of the hands. But he's kind of got that nice basketball slide where it's not effortless for him to like cover a lot of ground to cover guys up. You see the long arms. And again, there's some issues to correct there. But I think that's something where you're like, after seeing stuff like that, because, he didn't do that at the Senior Bowl. He didn't really do it at the Combine. Like, this is the first time I've seen him take, like, tackle sets in person. And that athleticism is something that I think can't be overvalued in terms of his ability to project to that left tackle spot. The one thing is, like, he's still working some stuff in terms of how to, like, roll his hips on contact at the first level and, like, double teams and stuff. But I think that's stuff that, with a good coach, you can get to. But the athlete, I think, is there. And I think, like, that's something that with tackles specifically, if that's not there, either you got to be huge, either you got to be, like Trent Brown big, or you got to be an amazing athlete. And I think after seeing him, and I want to watch more obviously, but the fact that he's moving so well and so fluidly gives me a lot of hope that he could be that guy.
No doubt. Long way to go.
Yeah.
More on the offense after the next practice. All right, if you want the full episode of Take Command, it's available for you now on demand, anytime, anywhere. Coming up next week, we'll obviously review more of the OTA period as we'll have another practice. It's been cool to watch Quinn and company just evolve practice every single week. You get to see something a little bit different, which they don't really care about us seeing something different, but it has been cool and insightful. So if you missed any of Take Command and the rewind of week 2, you got a long weekend to check that out. And then next week, week 3, we will be out there in Ashburn. We also did a mailbag episode earlier in the week, so good time to catch up this weekend if you got a long drive somewhere, etc., over the holiday weekend. Of course, if you missed any part of the radio show, you can also catch up on that. The Hoffman Show podcast available in all the same places Take Command is: Apple Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, the free Odyssey app, and we are also cut up the clips live for YouTube at the Team 980 and at Craig Hoffman. Which, by the way, Anthony Haney, BT Dubs, party time, crossed 7,000 subscribers and 2,500. It's actually been a big milestone week. 7,000 subscribers at Craig Hoffman, which is the older channel, but Team 980, people are subscribing there too. It's at 2,500.
We booming, baby.
We love to see it. Simply, absolutely love to see it. And we're almost at 100 already on the new Hoffman Women's Sports Channel.
Oh, we love to hear that as
Business is booming. And if you are a subscriber to the Hoffman Women's Sports Channel, perhaps you will have seen my chat
with Andy Sullivan or Casey Kruger. Two fantastic Washington Spirit interviews this week. If you haven't, though, that's okay, because we are going to play the interview with Casey for you to round out our week ahead of the Spirits game tonight against Reign FC next here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Big night here in the southern edge of the district. You got the Nationals, first pitch in just over 15 minutes against the Seattle Mariners, and then it is Seattle Reign FC across the street at Audi Field. And Anthony, we discovered earlier, it's a wacky bit. It's just Washington, D.C. versus Seattle weekend because you got the Mystics and the Storm tomorrow in Seattle.
It's a hell of a weekend. I hope, we can be victorious in all three.
It's the battle for the naming rights of Washington forever.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, this is how you settle it. A best of three.
How do you think we're going to fare?
1 and 2. I think the Spirit will win tonight.
Yep.
I think the Nationals are in a bit of a sideways, not good place.
It has to end somewhere, though, Craig.
Although, you know what? I'm going 2 for 3. I'm thinking the ladies carry it.
There we go.
The Mystics have to get off the schneid,
Let's get
right?
it, man. Yeah.
Like, please?
I hope.
Pretty, please?
Pretty?
Or just, how many games in a row can you lose by 2 points? I don't want to find out. I don't want to find out by losing more. I would like to find out with a win.
Yeah, I don't either.
So that's hopefully tonight. Earlier in the week, got the chance to catch up with Casey Kruger, of course, U.S. Women's National Team defender for years and years, played with Chicago and got traded to the Spirit this season. Off to a fantastic start, huge essential part of their versatility as a club and some of the success they've been able to find. She also banged home a goal on Saturday and ahead of tonight's game at Audi Field. Wanted to chat with her. And also, I did not know this when we scheduled the interview earlier in the week, but it came out, or we chatted hours after she was named to yet another U.S. Women's National Team. She's in the June camp along with 5 other Spirit players, and Corey Bethune and Kate Wiesner will also be there as training players. So just started off the conversation with a hearty congratulations. Stop the show on the Team 980. Of course, we're always live on the free Odyssey app and streaming on YouTube at the Team 980, where you see I am joined by Washington Spirit and U.S. Women's National Team defender Casey Kruger. Casey, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on a big day for you and 5 of your teammates. Congratulations on the June call-up.
Thank you for having me, and thank you very much. Super excited so many got called in.
Yeah, so you might hear Caleb in the background at some point during the interview. So if anybody hears a small child, yes, Caleb is around. And we're going to talk to Casey not only about her 2-legged child, but her 4-legged child, I heard, because it's Pitchside Pups this Friday. So we got to get the lowdown on the Kruger family dog as well. But let's start off with the news from today. I don't, can you take us inside the expectations for you and the national team teammates? Because this is Emma Hayes' first roster. This is her first camp. So, were there expectations on who would or wouldn't? Did you expect massive changes? Obviously, there's a lot of new names, including some of your teammates that are getting called in. What was the lead up to today like?
Yeah, I think just trying to control thoughts and focusing on, the club environment helps massively, because when you get too sucked in, it gets a little bit stressful. But I wasn't really quite sure what to expect. It's the first camp where Emma will be there. There's a lot of new faces on the staff as well. And so I thought maybe there would be some changes, but it's always a blessing to get that call up. And so I had the same reaction of just being so grateful. But it's really cool to see so many Spirit players get called in, especially the rookies. That's super cool to see them get rewarded for, playing phenomenally so far. And Obs is back as well. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, no, Obs, I'm so happy she got the call. How involved has it felt like Emma has been in these last whatever number of months? Obviously, Twyla's done such a tremendous job leading the team, and being present, but has there felt like this voice from afar? And I guess also I'd ask how similar it is to the club environment, because you guys have Jonathan, who's about to come over and take over as well, where Adrian's been doing a fantastic job on the ground.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of similarities. Both have done an incredible job. Twyla's been really, really great as far as, presenting the concepts and how we want to play, and, working on a little bit each and every camp. Emma was in the December camp for a few days, so we got to meet with her, and she presented, expectations and things like that. And, really tried to like make time for each of us in the short amount of time that she was there. And then Twyla, of course, in the coming months was the face and was kind of relaying, the concepts and the messages. So she did a fantastic job, and she's also remaining on Emma's staff as well. So that'll help things move seamlessly, I think. But yeah, we're all just like really excited to get more time with Emma and just, see what she's all about.
Yeah, definitely. Casey Kruger with us here on the Hoffman Show. So you mentioned a couple of your teammates, especially some of the young ones, getting the call up. Hal, I think, was probably a surprise for a lot of people. I mean, she's been fantastic, but it just doesn't seem like a player like that at that position is going to be able to break into the roster like this. And she's played her tail off. So here she is. And obviously Croy also gets the call in as a practice player. I'm curious, like the first time in the club setting where you're like, whoa, these two rookies are a little bit different. They really have something here. And, what it means for them is someone who's gone through this process yourself over the years to get this first call up on a national team at this stage of their careers.
Yeah. And Kate as well as a training player.
Yeah.
I would say, honestly, I'm not surprised. Like we see it day in and day out, like how freaking good they are. And so I wasn't surprised to see their names. I was like, they've been performing. They earned it. Yeah, we see it every single day. Like it was very clear, like pretty early on, like they are some special rookies. Like they don't play like rookies whatsoever. Like when they step on the field, it's like they've been a pro for years. So we're just like, we're truly lucky to have such a great group of rookies, both on and off the field.
Yeah, definitely. I have people that have watched a couple of our interviews over the course of the year with you and your teammates will know that I've said this before, but I'll tell it to you. Like I asked Croy, I was like, do you realize this is supposed to be hard, right? And she's like, yeah, but like, I don't know. It's just soccer. And it's like, that's how they play. It's really wild. And impressive to see. Obviously, with the Spirit, you guys are rolling right now. One of the craziest games in the history of the craziest league on earth over the weekend. 36 minutes is all it took for 6 goals. That was a record. What's it like to play in a game like that? Like you've been a part of your fair share of NWSL chaos over the years. Like what's it like to be in the midst of that?
Yeah, I feel like I've been in some pretty crazy games, but that was, one of the top games that was pretty crazy. But I think it was great that we were able to, fight back and score 4 goals, like incredible. But I think one of the things we really focused on at halftime was just taking a breath, like not making it such a crazy, chaotic game and let it play into their hands. Like taking a breath and like knowing when to have longer attacks, not go necessarily all the time, and just trying to like settle down the rhythm of the game. But I mean, it was fun as well.
Yeah, I'm curious how you balance that because like I've always used the term like chaos agents for certain types of players. Like Rose is the ultimate chaos agent. Sanchez, obviously here for years, is a chaos agent. Croy's a different version of it, but has that. Obviously, Trinity is a chaos agent in the way that she plays because they can just create something out of nothing, and all of a sudden there's an attack that's on. But between you and Andy and some of the veteran presence, how do you guys try to, on the field, communicate and balance out letting those types of players do what they do and be great, but also make sure that you don't put yourself in a bad spot going back the other way?
Yeah, I think it's tough at times to balance it because it's like we've got such exciting players, such dynamic players. So we can go. We can do that, but we also have like technical, high IQ. Like we've got a great balance of both things. And so I think, yeah, it's like it's on us to be able to, slow down the rhythm sometimes and say, okay, like we're a little bit tired. We've been go. So like, let's just step on the ball. Let's keep it a little bit and wait for the gaps to open up rather than just trying to counterattack every time we get it.
Casey Kruger is with us. And I apologize, Casey. We're almost 7 minutes into this and we haven't mentioned the top story. You scored. To walk me through the goal as you were a part of the chaos.
That's not the top story.
It's a top story. It definitely counts.
The goal was just kind of a lot of chaos in the 18. It was definitely a team effort. Specifically, T really kept the ball alive a couple times on that play. So big shout out to her. She kept it in, and I think Hal took a shot. And yeah, it was just crazy. And then it kind of popped out to me, and I said, all right, let me whack this thing. And it went in. So I think at that point, it was really good to go up on them and just have that surge of energy and continuing to build on that.
You have now got, what are we, 8 or something games into the season? How many games we are in with Aubrey behind you? And I'm curious to kind of compare and contrast for you because you played with Alyssa for so many years. And obviously Aubrey just got the call up, so would love to put the spotlight on her always. What's it like? What is the through line that makes them great? The things that they share, and then stylistically, what makes them different and unique?
Oh, compare and contrast. Let's just focus on Obs and just say, like, it's just such a sense of security having her, behind us. Really, really great communicator and organizing things so early and clearly, and it just helps so much getting us into the right spots early on. Obviously, incredible shot stopper. Just can't say enough great things about her, but it's been so great having her behind us.
Is there something, and I'm not trying to like have you necessarily compare the two, so I'm going to make it like a thing that they share. But I'm just curious, like around great goalkeepers, whether it's Alyssa, Aubrey, anybody else that you played with, like, is there a common thing that if, say, a young goalkeeper is watching, it's like, hey, you should, if you can do this thing, it will help elevate your game. Take this piece of advice from a world class defender like yourself who benefits from this thing.
I think just being able to organize everything in front of you is such a huge quality. Putting the team in a good spot and making sure everything stays organized. I think that's probably a number one thing I would say.
Yeah. Last thing for you on the soccer front real quick, and then we can have a quick fun off the field with the Pitchside Pups game, of course, this Friday at Audi Field. But you have switched sides quite a bit this year, sometimes in the middle of the game. We see that also up top with Trin and Hatchie switching sides as well. What is it about the way you guys play that you're able to translate? Like, my guess from the outside would be that it's a very principles first approach, and then you just apply those things on no matter where you are on the field. But that also takes highly intelligent players to be able to actually execute that. So, what is it about both your personnel and the way you guys are coached that you have that flexibility to make that change even within a game?
Yeah, it's definitely like game dependent. It's really great to have such an adaptable group of players that we can make a lot, whether we need to switch sides in the back line or in the front line based on what the other team presents. And having that flexibility is huge as well because, rather than like waiting until halftime, like we can, if we see something, we can make that happen as well and make that adjustment quicker. But I just think it says a lot about, like you said, the high IQ of this team and also the principles that, the coaches have put into place. Like we're all on the same page and we understand, how we're trying to play, what we're trying to do, no matter where we're at.
All right, last but not least, it is Pitchside Pups on Friday. How distracted do you, like, how long will it take to be like, oh my God, I don't want to go play with the dogs?
Oh, it's going to be tough. I am a big dog person, and I think we have a lot of dog people on this team too. So it's,
yes, for
it's
sure.
definitely going to be a distraction for sure, but like a welcome distraction. It'll be nice. It's one of the best themes for sure.
So I was told that you do have a dog. Tell us about your pup.
I do have a dog. His name is Frederick Krueger, Freddy Krueger. See what we did there.
That's well done. Excellent work.
He's a golden doodle. He was supposed to be a mini golden doodle, but he's like over 60 pounds, so I'm not really sure what happened. And he's just like a big ball of love. He's like a big bear with huge paws, and he's the best dog ever.
Does he have more retriever or more doodle to him?
Oh gosh. That's a good question. He's just like super goofy. So
more doodle.
Probably more doodle, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah. How do he and Caleb get along?
Caleb, I think Fred is Caleb's favorite person. He just climbs all over him all the time. And then poor Fred is like the most patient pup in the world. He just like takes it. But yeah, they're going to be best friends real soon.
I love it.
It's just a one-way street right now, but it's going to be a two-way street soon, I think.
I love it. And will Freddie be at the match on Friday?
Will Freddie be at the match?
Yeah.
TBD. You got to come
TBD.
find out.
All right, people, if that's not a reason to buy tickets, you get to go see a 60-pound golden doodle and hundreds of other pups. Check it out, WashingtonSpirit.com/tickets. Casey, congratulations again. Continued success, and we'll talk to you later in the season.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Just letting you have your one shot, Anthony.
Down on Friday.
It was better when it was just a dancing production, but I love your enthusiasm. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live on the free Odyssey app, and you can watch the shenanigans on YouTube too at the Team 980. Another great week of shows in the book, and I didn't know what to expect this week. We're in the season of content, and I feel like we had a great week.
Hey, we had a great month, to be honest.
Yeah, a lot of fun stuff.
Yep.
So if you missed any of it, it's all there on the podcast feed. It's all there on the YouTubes. It's all there for all your viewing pleasure. What you got going on this week? You're going to the beach this weekend.
I am going to the beach. I'll be back on Sunday to grill out with the fam. And then Monday, you guys are trying to convince me to participate in another workout.
Yeah, trying to get you to take the same class you took with us the last time.
Where I almost died.
Where you almost died.
Yeah.
But this one will be a little bit later in the morning, and you also know what you're in for, so you can fuel up for it. I think you'll do great. And then we'll feed you after, and then we can finally play some FIFA.
Yes, sir.
Which is really how I'm bragging. We got a carrot and a stick approach, if you will, here. So I see, even though we, the show, will not see you, the listening audience, on Monday, Anthony, I'll see you on Monday.
Yes, you will.
Yeah. I'm just going to enjoy, we are going to enjoy the fact that everybody leaves DC this weekend. I might just run through the middle of the street. No, I'm probably not going to do that. That still sounds a little dangerous.
There's going to be a lot of people visiting as well, though.
Nah.
You don't think so?
No.
All right, never mind.
I mean, there'll be some, but more people leave than come. That's for sure.
Yeah.
DC on holiday weekends, everyone gets the bleep out of here. Especially this one, because everyone wants to go to their shore house or their shore spot. Whether it's the Virginia beaches, whether it's the Maryland beaches, they go all the way up to Delaware. Whatever it is, everyone gets the hell out of DC on Memorial Day weekend. And we are not doing that. We are staying in DC, and we're getting the hell out of town next weekend. I only got to work 2 days next week.
Well, lucky you. Well, I'm actually off one day next week too.
Are you? You're off Friday?
Thursday.
Thursday?
I wish it was Friday.
Oh. What are you doing that you're off Thursday, but you got to come back on Friday?
Graduation.
You should have just taken Friday off.
I know.
That's okay.
It's all right.
It'd be like a little, because then it's 2 on, 1 off, 1 on, 2 off.
Yeah.
And then we're back for June. There's also a chance that following week that we do a show from Ashburn one day. Because I think that's the mandatory week, although it might be the week after. I don't know. Now we're in enough far advanced that I'd have to do some math, and we know how me and math get along.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's our weekends. Other than that, anything else on the docket that we need? Any other housekeeping we need, or anything coming up that we need to let people know about, Anthony? Anything on the show next week that we preemptively know is a big deal? I don't have anything that comes to top of mind. I'm just making sure I'm not forgetting anything. I mean,
I just know we're off Monday.
We got a 3-day weekend. You think we know what's coming up on the show on Tuesday? Get out of here. Get out of here with that.
Yeah.
We got 3 days worth of sports to stack up and then unpack on Tuesday. So we'll do that Tuesday and Wednesday. It'll be a good time. Other than that, I do believe it is time to close out this here radio program. Are you mocking me?
No.
Are you sure?
I thought my mic was off.
So the answer was yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
Maybe.
You're fired.
Real things.
We're not going to be so this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
Alrighty then. By the way, Anthony, very much not fired. Very, very much not fired. Sorry, sir. You have to come to work, but not until Tuesday. You're fired until Tuesday.
Say no more.
Okay. We got two great real things. We're going to start with Luka Doncic on Inside the NBA, where they had him say some Shaq-themed phrases, whatever the hell that means, in Slovenian.
Slovenian lessons with Luka and Shaq.
We had Luka say some Shaq-themed phrases in Slovenian, and we want you to try to translate.
DJ Diesel. DJ Diesel. Oh, that was easy. Pogooglaj me, Čak. Sounds like Google me, Chuck, because I speak his language. So, Zella Babado, brother, Zella Babado.
Gremo na shisha.
Shisha, hookah. I'm going to the hookah bar?
Ding, ding, ding.
Yes, mom. 4 prstene.
Yes, Mom, I'm still pretty.
I have 4 rings.
Šel sam na ribolov.
Show some respect. Go fishing. Don't give me answers.
He actually did better than I would have.
Yeah, he did pretty good.
Honestly, I had a harder time, and part of that understanding Shaq than I did Luka.
Nah, he did a good job, though.
Shut up, Chuck. Big dummy.
Gone fishing.
Yeah, gone fishing.
Cancun 3.
1, 2, 3, Cancun. It's funny because the same mic technique you use for the Belichick impression, you use for the Shaq impression.
I know.
I didn't realize that until right now. We're just trying to play 4 downs of good football, maybe 2, get a first down sometimes, you know.
Or 3.
Or 3. But I love punting, especially left-footed punters. Anyway, apropos of none of that, this is so great. My buddy Noah Eagle / our buddy Noah Eagle, our fellow Syracuse Orangeman Noah Eagle, guest on the show, Noah Eagle, won his first ever sports Emmy this week. Yeah! 178 more, and he'll catch his dad. Yeah! No, but I'm really, really excited for Noah, who, by the way, he's off to Roland Garros to call the French Open this week for NBC. Good gig. Good gig, Noah. Excellent work. But Noah won this sports Emmy for his work on the Nickelodeon broadcast of the NFL, which led to an unbelievable acceptance speech.
You know, I always dreamed of maybe doing a speech like this. I don't think I ever would have guessed that I would thank SpongeBob and Patrick, but he's so much more than just a square that lives in a pineapple under the sea. So thank you to those guys.
Tough room.
Yeah.
I would have been howling. That was funny. That was well delivered. You got some chuckles in the room. What's wrong with those people?
I do think what he said is a bit of a tongue twister. I don't think if I would have been able to, eloquently say that.
That's why he's an Emmy winner.
You know, I always dreamed of maybe doing a speech like this. I don't think I ever would have guessed that I would thank SpongeBob and Patrick, but he's so much more than just a square that lives in a pineapple under the sea. So thank you to those guys.
That's the thing. It's not just that he thanked them. It's he had the one. He got him with the 1-2.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like a nice little haha jab. It's the old 1-2. But in all sincerity, congrats to my guy Noah Eagle. Really, really pumped for him, and that will be the first of many that he garners in his ever-growing, spectacular career. All right, that's our show for today. We will see you on Tuesday. Have a wonderful, safe, and hopefully joy-filled Memorial Day weekend. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.